So welcome back, everybody. Great to see folks from all over the world here. And we're just getting going. We just had our main keynote and we have a key panel right now moderated by Nishant Bajaria, which is focused on building a technical privacy program in 2024.
Thank you, Hernando. My name is Nishant Bajaria. I'm a privacy engineering advisor to Privado, and I've written a book on this topic, and I've worked for multiple companies and begun privacy programs there. I'm excited to have this panel and talk about building a privacy program for growth, security, innovation, and trust all at once. I would love for my fellow panelists to introduce themselves. We'll go in my order here. Rebecca, you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, I'm Rebecca Shore. I'm the Vice President and Chief Privacy of Albertsons Companies, although today I'm speaking on behalf of myself.
As are we all. But thank you for that little reminder again, Rebecca. Thank you so much. Huang?
Thank you, Nishant. Hi, my name is Huang, and I lead the privacy program at Axon, which is a public safety company. We are in the market to help law enforcement agency to protect the public with hardware solutions such as Taser or, body cam, as well as software solution in the evidence management space. Been doing privacy for over 15 years. Super excited to be here.
Thank you, Huang. Excited to have you here as well. Jim, you go next.
Thanks, Nishant. Jim Singh, Chief Privacy Officer at Principal Financial Group. Excited to be here. Didn't even see a disclaimer. These are personal observations. So, happy to partake and learn from the team.
Fantastic. So let's start with the most obvious question. Everybody wants to talk about building a privacy program that is responsible, innovation, fast, etc., etc. We all agree on those sentiments. But there is still sort of this feeling that all of that privacy work comes at the expense of the business, and it's a cost, it's a slowdown factor. So what do you have? We all disagree with that principle, but it's important to ensure our audience understands why and how they can both not just make the argument politically effectively, but also actually make the program itself efficient, right? So how do you communicate the efficiency and how do you deliver it? So I'm going to open it up to Rebecca first. You want to talk about this a little bit?
So I think that a lot of how you build your program depends on whether or not it is considered a block. I think that we all believe in innovation and we think we support it. But if you build a program that is not flexible and that does not change with the pace of the business, it's critical. I think a lot of us look at the law and kind of blame the law for why we don't have flexibility or we can't move quickly when people come with innovative solutions our way. And I don't think it's necessarily the law's fault. I think it's when you build your program, if you don't build with the idea that you need to move with speed, and you can do that. You can be cautious and responsible, but still move with speed. I think it's part of that process of, not letting the law be an excuse for why you're not building a technical program, a privacy program that can move not exactly instead, because we do have work to do, but to move at a good speed to allow the business to flourish.
That is great. And I love the fact that Rebecca honed in on the fact that the law may be incomplete, but you cannot keep blaming the law. Just as you cannot keep using the law as a way to beat up the business and do this or else, you cannot overly blame the law either. So with that being said, Jim, you want to go next?
Yeah, just to amplify some of Rebecca's comments there. I think capital allocation is what it's about, and sort of you're competing within the different interests. So I think one of the reframes that works well is pitching it around intent and capability. I think it's really important for the business to realize if you're intentional about privacy, then you have to build some capabilities, and it needs to be sort of a full spectrum of capability, not picking and choosing and then sort of leaving inadequate capabilities from a delivery posture. That's one. Second is to be becoming relevant to the business, delivering at the speed of business. And I agree that the argument of pitching privacy is a threat or, the fines and all that, I think those have been played too far, too often. So now it's really about business enablement, being relevant to the business, the speed of business, and then aligning intent and capability across the enterprise.
And I love that last line. So Hernando, hopefully backstage you capture these sound bites. Jim, can you repeat the last line? Intent and capability, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah. You have to be clear from a strategic perspective. What's your intent? Is privacy going to be simply a compliance function, check the box function, or is it going to be a business enabler? Once you've decided on your intent, then you match those capabilities across the enterprise.
And I want people to remember, he said a couple of things, intent and capability. They're both important. If you build capability without a clear intent, you're wasting time and resources. If you keep talking about intent all day long, but don't build for it, you aren't moving any things in the right direction, right? So making sure that people don't fall into this trap of either intent or capabilities. It's got to be both. Initially, the intent drives capability, but then as you learn more from your capability deployment, you keep improving your intent as well. So the two work with each other. So I hope people on the call caught this excellent point that Jim made. With that being said, Huang, your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think I have to plus like 1,000 on what Rebecca and Jim have said. I think, privacy program definitely can definitely be a blocker to the organization, right? Because it's embedded so deeply in terms of how we use data, in terms of how we think about controls and risk management. So I think the note on intention and being really mindful of how you build, how you scale the team is really important. And just some, tactical ways that I tend to do this is just to make it very explicit for me and for my team. For example, we, have very clearly identified internal stakeholders and how they can benefit from the privacy program, whether it's through productivities, whether it's through business enablement. And we also set very, explicit metrics around how we'll achieve the goal of delivering for these internal stakeholders, right? So I think, again, really going back to being mindful, being thoughtful about it, because it is a really important function that has a big impact.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that for the people on the audience, these three folks have built programs at large companies, small companies, and there's a lot of diversity, but they all hone on the fact that you want a program that is functional. You want a program that demonstrates outcomes. Because at the end of the day, privacy is not the only game in town. There is physical security, there is misinformation. So any platform we have, you have to understand, just as people like us are asking for support, budget, etc., so are the folks who support those other causes, DEI, whatever you have it, right? So let's not be holier than thou from a privacy perspective. Let's focus on privacy as a business product enabler and a consumer protector rather than just as this first principle of doing the right thing. So that's great. So with that being said, product teams historically have been afraid of privacy. They sometimes think we're going to block them. Sometimes they try to give us only a part of the truth. Sometimes they're afraid to talk to us because they think all we do is slow them down. So when a product team comes to us and says, we have this amazing idea or we want to ship XYZ, and that is the first time a lot of these folks are even aware of a privacy program in their company, how do you handle that conversation? How do you start? How do you get them unlocked in the moment? How do you build that relationship? What does that initial contact look like? So Jim, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I think this depends on the firm, your operating context, some of the working processes you have in place, how fast you intake different ideas for exploration and exploiting. So it depends. There's an ecosystem that needs to be put into place. But at least from my perspective, the aspirational part is we should encourage innovation across the board. Be in the trust business. If you were to reframe privacy, it's innovators of trust. So given that as a log line or a pitch, and using that frame, the first is you have to again match it to what your operational context is, how fast things move, the organization from a flow and focus perspective. The second is you have to be able to clearly run a hypothesis, either to validate either the hypothesis is true or invalidate it. Because not every idea can be mature. Every idea costs a little bit of time, resources, context. There's certain ecosystem that needs to be shifted and emerged to bring in those ideas from a product team. But I think if you have a fast process to validate, test, and wireframe it, and then moving it forward into your backlogs, there's some faster way of approaching and embracing innovation from the product teams.
That was great, Jim. Thank you so much. Rebecca, I'll go next.
Yeah, I actually really love when innovative ideas come my way. I think it's a fun opportunity as a privacy attorney to really listen and hear where the business is headed. I like to think about it as, we are here to enable the business, but it's also okay to say yes and yes, but. A part of our obligation is to provide that clarity and understanding. I also very much encourage teams not to wait till they've got something fully baked and they've already sold leadership on it, right? Because you're coming in later with that yes and you have to tweak something after it's already been fully, all right, this is how we're going to do it from leadership. So really encouraging teams to come earlier so that we can have that conversation. Just past ideation. I think that ideation doesn't necessarily need to have the privacy team in the room unless they want to, but just past that. So those conversations are starting to happen and you really can provide that privacy by design piece from the start. So you're not and doing it at the end and trying to rush to get something since they're about to push it out.
A couple of really great points, Rebecca. I mean, keep me honest, Rebecca, if I mistake you, but you said something on listening. A lot of times engineers feel like they're not being listened to, they're just being told what to do. So whether you're on the legal side or the engineering side of privacy, it is extremely critical to create a safe space so people feel comfortable, come to you and talk to you. Because what happens is when this happens once or twice, word goes around in the company, like, oh, the privacy folks are not scary anymore. So creating a culture of listening is very critical. So thank you so much for that, Rebecca.
Yeah, like I think similar to Rebecca, I love it when I hear new and innovative ideas. I think, in a way, it also keeps my own privacy skill and the privacy skills team sharp, right? Because I think we need to evolve with technology. We need to learn about things that are happening in the market, in the tech space. So I love it when folks bring new ideas to us. And I think, again, to folks' points already, you want to nurture an environment where that is comfortable for the team, where they don't feel like it, they find you, they will endure weeks and weeks of privacy reviews before they can move on to the next stage. And it's actually, speaking so many point of metrics in the past, that's one of the things I tend to gauge for in terms of trust relationship is, how many of these ideas are coming forward proactively versus reactively. And that's something I really observe in terms of trending and in terms of, success for the privacy team as a metric.
Thank you. And I love the perspective that this is all an enablement function. I do want to have a bit of a shout out. We have a lot of people in the audience. If you have questions, put them into the right-hand panel. I'll try and incorporate them. We cannot promise that every question will get answered, but I would love to have the questions come in so we can use them whenever possible. The next point is, how do you make sure that privacy is seen as a partner? I mean, the challenge is that we have two customers within the business. We have the board of directors, compliance folks. They need a level of support to make sure that compliance requirements are being met. But then you also have the internal engineers who sometimes want to ship stuff quickly because as an engineer or a PM, shipping stuff, getting stuff out the door is a way to sort of like prove that you are doing good work for the business. A lot of debate right now about productivity around diffs, etc. You have two internal customers whose requirements are not always the same thing. And privacy is in the middle trying to play peacemaker. So how do you build the program to be seen as a strategic partner in a very honest broker? So Rebecca, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think that so much of this is really being there when those strategic conversations are happening, right? So if you're part of planning sessions, if you're there to, and partly just in listening mode, right? So it's wonderful when you've been to a few, your IT planning sessions, your product pieces, and you're just in listening mode. And the next time they come, they say, we want you to come and participate actively. I think that's building the trust that everyone's really talked about here is that the more you can be seen as you're trying to enable the business and the more you're there in those meetings, you're not some far up person that maybe someday I consult, that you're actually listening, you're understanding the roadmaps, you're understanding that you're there as a soundboard. Is this something interesting? Is this legal? That you're really open and that people start to recognize that you're not really just this compliance function. I don't see privacy as compliance function. I like the idea that we're here for trust, that we're here to advocate for our associates and our customers and all the other people that we're here for. And part of that is making sure that we are that voice in time, in that moment. And it may be for the first 6 months, you are just in listening mode in those meetings and kind of giving constructive feedback. But at some point, people are going to start to see your value and ask you to participate more actively.
Yeah. And I love the fact again and again that this is not purely a compliance play. Remember, I've said this before, Target was PCI compliant when they got breached a decade ago. And then they still got breached and the PCI organization retroactively withdrew the compliance. So compliance is a fair weather friend. Trust will always be a friend. So build for trust, not just compliance. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah, I think listening, understanding, to Rebecca's point, your partners, your business, your product partners' priorities is really important. And I think, of course, delivering on your promise and your commitment to them. But I think something that I know I used to be, not so good at, still working on it, is helping the partner understand the value that you bring to these conversations, right? Because a lot of time, like security, you talk, well, nothing will happen. So what you and your team deliver might not be as explicit or as obvious to these folks. And what I found has been helpful is to, not so much being boastful, but just being, more intentional about communicating, hey, look, like this is a great success. This is how, like the privacy team really helped. We would love to do more of the same this in the future, etc. Those kind of follow up after projects, I think will help build that relationship with products and with business in the future and help probably accelerate the trust between the teams a bit more.
Great. Okay, Jim, you had some thoughts here?
Yeah, I think one area that there's always a challenge, at least, when you're building a program, is how do you posture privacy within the organization? Is it a line of defense model, first line, second line? Is it embedded within information security law or wherever? So I think positioning and posturing privacy is really important. And then once you know where privacy is postured, then as how do you climb that value ladder? To Rebecca and Huang's point, we are demonstrating value by enlisting, by enabling products, going to the market faster. But then you should have a clear roadmap of how you go up that value ladder. And simply compliance of the floor or compliance of the ceiling. Second is how do you move from the trust equation to becoming privacy forward, privacy first across the enterprise. So having that roadmap, having that advocacy across the value chains is important as you sort of build and become that strategic enabler across the enterprise.
Awesome. Thank you. I see a question on our list here, and I'm going to take that question to make sure that people feel like we're answering the questions. So I'm going to paraphrase a question from Vikram Diaz. I think he's talking about merging data privacy and protection programs, so it's essentially privacy and security. But any program across the company, be it compliance, be it data protection, security, etc., what are the upsides and downsides of those programs? Not necessarily just merging, but working together. Like, how does that actually look like? And just for context, as a privacy leader, I've reported straight to the CISO, reported straight to the chief privacy officer, reported into engineering directly. So there is no one answer. But how do you see, from an organizational perspective, how these programs could work together and whether they should be thought of as one and the same? So any ideas? Rebecca, you go first.
I think that there should be greater integration. I'm not going to really speak to reporting structure because I do think it's dependent on the buy-in from the organization and the import of where privacy really stands and the type of whether or not you want to be bleeding edge and the company has decided to invest or whether or not kind of want to be middle of the pack. But I do think that the privacy office and the CISO should be hand in hand and they should be best buddies. And that's part of what they do because it's, important that we understand what we have, but it's critical that we protect it, right? So that's got to be part of it as well. But I think it's really important that there's deep connections with IT. In particular, if your privacy engineers sit within IT and don't report directly up to the privacy office, you want to make sure that it feels like one organization, even if there's different reporting structures. So I don't necessarily think they need to be connected formally, but I feel like the way the organization operates should be that they feel like partners and that partners in everything, right? Then it's not just, privacy is going to do all of these things and later we'll talk about security or vice versa. But it is, have you talked to my security counterparts? I do think one of the things that we're going to start to see a shift on with what's going on with AI and AI governance, that it's possible that privacy might expand into privacy and trust. And we might start to see more of things in that space of what is becoming the privacy space because it is really a very key function in the trust aspect. But I don't necessarily think that there's a convergence that's all going to come together. I think there's different ideas of how an organization is structured to determine really the mindset of where it's appropriate to put privacy and how it connects to InfoSec and IT and all these other pieces.
Great. Thank you. Huang, you go next.
Yeah. Again, I agree with Rebecca. I think we are having a mic thing this morning or something, but I have built, privacy programs under both the CISO organization as well as EW organization. And I think, again, to the point that it is not so much about the organizational structure about it, but it's about how the team works together. I think there are a lot of synergy in terms of operational tasks. Like, for example, if you do privacy by design and you have a partner who's do security by design, probably one of the foundational steps is talking to your product partners, right? Gathering information. And a lot of time it's the same set of information. So that is an opportunity to collaborate. Instead of making your product, your engineering team answer the same question twice or multiple times, you as a privacy lead can collaborate with your security lead partner to get the same set of questions, which might also be good to share with your legal partner. So I think being mindful, thinking about operational overlaps and how to reduce those redundancy with your partners, I think is my approach. I tend to go no matter where I sit within the org.
And I have some stuff to add, but let's go to Jim go first. Jim, add your thoughts here?
Yeah, no, I think it's been touched on. One is busting silos. I think this should be number one job for in privacy world, because we're coming into organizations where there are entrenched mindsets, different ways of working. So how best we can influence and bust those silos. That's one. Second is looking at the flow of work. As Huang said, you're operating and reacting to the same set of facts. So one, collect them once and then have each expert area adjudicate those based on the facts. Sourcing needs some data, legal needs another setup. It's the same sort of from a vendor risk perspective, from a data adjudication perspective. So it's again synchronization, removing the redundancy, efficiency of flow. But it does take, running these, like what I call short-term experiments to see what works best, and then influencing some of the organization culture and appetite for things that they've done in the past.
All great points. I'll just leave people with one example. Let's assume for a second that as a privacy leader, you want to collect as little data as possible when it comes to location mobility, right? Because you are afraid about people being stalked, fraud, etc. But then again, your security team says our platform is being used for child trafficking or something, illegal trafficking, right? So we need to track location. We need to find out who these people are, because real lives are at risk. So you have this tension where the security folks want to do the right thing because they want to track somebody and save somebody's life. And you are concerned that if that data is available to everybody, you might have the wrong kind of tracking. So it is critical. And to Rebecca's point, some of these things don't depend upon reporting structure, but they do depend upon you reporting to each other what you're doing and why. So I think when you build these organizations, think about what you want to prevent. What one good thing might prevent another bad thing someplace else, and vice versa, right? There is no set mentality, especially in this day and age when resources are scarce. You want to make these decisions and not come into the conversation with a bunch of dogma, because you will have to adapt as you go along. Great insight, Rebecca and Jim and Huang. Thank you. I'm going to again cheat and go to the audience for questions. So George Matthew asks, is there a way to deputize non-privacy professionals to not just support privacy programs, but actually help with governance? So basically, how do you look at your non-privacy experts across the company and create champions for the program to help drive the program forward, get buy-in, and represent you when you cannot be in the room? So what does that look like? Huang, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, thank you. I have, implemented some of these programs throughout the years. And I think the key there is to find that, really hard balance of giving these folks meaningful work, but also don't distract them away from their day jobs. And I think part of giving them meaningful works too is really to identify the skill sets that they have and the privacy tasks that you want them to take on, right? Is it merely evangelizing that there is a privacy team routing folks to the right direction? I think that's something that a lot of folks can easily jump in and do. Or is it about participating in reviews? And that's something that's more technical, require a little bit more privacy skill. So however you want to set it up, you want to make sure you support these folks, give them the right training, give them the right resources and material. So that way, when they are being your champion, after being deputized, they can succeed in that role.
That's great. Rebecca, go next.
Yeah, so along with those, like the right tools, I think we have an obligation as privacy organizations to make sure our technical controls that we give to our champions are actually not legalese, and that they're operational, so that they have a tool set, right? That they have that is, if it's not exactly written like a requirement or a user story, it's close enough that the work that they're doing within the organization and embedded within is that first pass. And then they're coming back to us and they're like 90% baked, because they're following the guidelines and principles we've written in a way that speaks, that's the technical control, actually read technical like anything else, that we're not just passing on guidance that sounds like a lawyer wrote it. I feel like that is a really great way to embed champions, to get people to have buy-in. And even if they're not formal champions, it's just people who love privacy, but they're seeing that the resources we're providing are actually usable. I think that's a big gap in a lot of programs. They're like, here's your legal requirements. And they're not thinking about how does that translate and how does that actually operationalize within a T organization.
And, the folks on the CPO side who are typically attorneys, if they could think like Rebecca, that'd be awesome because, there's a lot of good collaboration waiting to happen, but it's kind of incumbent upon us to sort of set the tone. Jim, you want to go next and your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think one is empowering privacy champs. That's one, reducing the friction within the lines of business to advocate and bring privacy issues or concerns to the right channels. And then I think one of the thinking is it's not one size fits all, so you can have some, and sort of what I call tier one champions, having this sort of a level 2 or a privacy contact with more authority and domain knowledge to provide business level judgment, balance privacy risks with the enablement of business. Then the third line could be the privacy officer, depending on the appetite of the business, how much you want to invest and cultivate this resource set. But I think this is one of those game changers for the privacy office to have eyes and ears across the enterprise.
Awesome. So before I jump to the next question, a bit of a shout out to Hernando. We are building a privacy engineering community on Slack. So Hernando is going to make those links available. We want people to have those conversations and those contacts because all the wisdom in the world does not live on this panel. There are other ideas, other questions out there. And we want to create a community of folks that are business minded, agile, hungry for information, ready to adapt and be privacy experts all at the same time. So Hernando, please make the link available. I see Devesh made it available. So please join us. It's an informal thing. We speak on behalf of ourselves. People helping each other out. So, and I know people that have gotten great jobs for it as well. So it's a great tool to have all around. So please join our community. With that being said, I'll jump to the next question here. How do you deal with the fact that there is not going to be a global privacy law anytime soon? It's very hard to get these laws passed. A lot of governments across the world are trying, but it takes a while to get this done correctly. Plus, it's very hard to get one law that captures every need. So how do you operationalize a privacy program to speak to not just an acceptable level of compliance, but impactful protection for the business and the customers at the same time? How do you essentially prepare your company for compliance and trust in a world where there is no clear guidelines?
Sure. I think the international space of globalizing privacy operations always remains a challenge. There's a cultural nuance, there's organizational dynamics at hand that needs to be looked at. I think focusing or anchoring one in privacy principles and frameworks is an easy way to organize, because that way, at least from a structural perspective, you're all aligned and committed to a particular framework that can be global in nature. The second is, the global journey, I think, takes a bit of time, at least in my experience. One approach we've used is think of like setting up a listening station, then a consulate, and then a full-fledged embassy from a global jurisdictional perspective. And that takes a bit of, being on the ground, being able to understand the context that you're operating in. A Latin American context is much different than the APAC and EU. There are nuances from how organizations are designed. But I think anchoring ones around a common set of compliance that everybody can react to, having those dashboards and anchoring in a framework or principles is the fastest way to organize and assimilate.
And I love how we've gone from the legal team just implements the law to actually helping people where there is no clear law. So I just love the fact that we are moving in that direction. So Huang, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really about, building the program to be as flexible as possible. One thing that I tend to do, like when setting up a new policy, is to just look across where the different markets that we operate in and think about if we don't need this policy or this feature now, will we need it in the future? And in a way, use that as a benchmark to see how much we should invest in building that solution and building in a flexible way. For example, building a feature that might be available for multiple markets, but put the markets where those features are not required behind a feature flag that we don't turn on into a ban. And so I think there are some tactical things that you can do during planning and during your analysis of requirements to make your program a little bit more flexible and more malleable when you need to make changes.
That sounds great. Rebecca, are we calling you for this question?
I mean, I'll just add that I think that we owe it to our technical teams to create controls that at least meet 80% of kind of that broader global requirements, right? You're going to have local nuances. There may be laws that don't make sense because although they have good intent, the actual implementation of it is more complex for customers. And so you might take a principle from that to borrow from Jim, there are principles from all of these things that we see come out and applied universally, but you might have a nuance for that local. And the goal is to have something that's 80%. So you're not saying if you run your program more strategically, we found this after GDPR, where a lot of companies only data mapped for Europe. And you're like, that doesn't spend a lot of time data mapping. Why did you just do Europe? Why not do universally, so you understand what's out there? And so encouraging teams to build those controls to that 80% level with that 20% nuance locally means that you can hand your technical team something that is almost universally the same with a little nuance here and there, because in the US, maybe a state has some distinction and they require exact length, but that exact language isn't user-friendly. So just apply it in that place and maybe have a user-friendly one everywhere else. And so you're giving actionable things, but you also have to continually socialize that nothing is going to be consistent in privacy, right? So today the law is this, tomorrow we find out the interpretation of what we thought the law was is 100% different. So you have to build that trust piece and understanding that we're giving you that 80% technical controls. This is what you guys go with. This is your requirements. But I might come back to you in 3 months and say, hey, we have a year to tweak this control in this way because we have a new understanding of this thing.
Just love the flexibility on that front. So I'm going to look at the questions and see if there are any questions. How do you manage the residual risks coming from technical privacy? So when you fix for I'm trying to interpret what Prasanna is asking, I think here, is that when you have this interaction where the engineers and the PMs come to you with innovative ideas, you catch risks, you consult with other privacy leaders, and you essentially at some point have to make a call saying, we're going to do X, but not Y. Because Y is not high risk or it's not going to happen, whatever. You make those judgment calls. But how do you track that residual risk? How do you make sure that the stuff that was deprioritized today does not disappear? Because I think we all work very fast. People have very little memory. We're all not working in the office anymore. How do you make sure that the stuff you deprioritize gets tracked correctly in case the priority changes? What methods do you use?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just really about good program management. Right? I think having someone who's more operational and good project/program manager as part of the team is really important for matters like this. And I think part of it too is also making sure you have the right forum to continue to talk about these residual risks, to make sure that, folks are aware of them. And as they change and shift, you can also rediscuss whether or not it's the right time to invest in addressing these. And I think identifying that forum, whether it be, at a team level, an org level, at the board, etc., I think is going to be important in terms of maintaining accountability as well.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, I think program management is critical to this. Standardized control library, and then your residual risk library is maintained, and that should be part of your normal grooming process as you're going through quarterly planning or whatever your implement is. That also needs to be looked at. But again, it's just building that rigor that this is equally as important as for the residual risk to have a treatment plan or mitigation plan, and that needs to be accounted in a reasonable horizon plan as we go forward. So again, it's building the rigor, the discipline, and making sure this becomes part of the normal operating rhythm as we.
Right, thank you. So we're down to our last 5 minutes. I want to look at a question that I think will apply to everybody in this audience here. So let's assume we have 3 kinds of privacy programs: a brand new program that is just getting off the ground, or the privacy program is basically one attorney or one engineer, like I used to be at WebMD back in the day. So new privacy programs would basically mean one person sitting in the corner over there. Then you have the next generation of privacy program that has dealt with a major crisis like GDPR, but is now looking for structure and scale. And then you have really mature privacy programs that are working very well, good relationships, partnerships across the board. For each of those 3 programs, how would you tell them to approach and invest in 2024? So I know it's a bit of a loaded question. I'll let you guys decide how to answer it, but 3 programs, very immature, operational and very mature. How should those programs find for 2024 in this age of efficiency? Rebecca, I want to go first.
Sure. So the program where you're just starting, I think part of it is you have to own it. You have to own that it's new and you're changing the entire bus while it's running. And so you're being strategic in how you answer questions. So you're building something out for the future. You're not just throwing something out there. You're taking that extra minute to build. And I think in this case, you're starting to build your deck and your pitch. You're looking at how do you start to explain what you do and build those relationships. You're developing your preliminary controls and you're keeping your roadmap super simple. Right? 3 things in a year that are big to accomplish is huge. Maybe 3 stretch goals. You're not looking at doing everything in year one. You're changing the tire while the car is moving. You have to think in a certain way. For that intermediate part, I think that's when you start to have a strategic plan and you look at other business units' roadmaps and understand how you fit and how you can enhance it. You maybe go through a maturity assessment and a gap assessment. You take the results and you work with your technology teams to understand, is this really a gap? How can we tackle it? You start looking at SLAs and what makes sense and what's actually technologically feasible. And if you're a mature program, and this is really important, there probably aren't a lot of very mature programs, but you don't say what we've done, we're done. We created our PIA. We did our process. We're totally good. We did that 5 years ago. You're continuing to find efficiencies and way to enhance, then move faster with the business. You're looking at new technologies and innovations, like what we're seeing in AI, and say, okay, what I've built, is it enough to move refast with the business? And you're continuing to refine.
That was great. Jim, we're down to the last 4 minutes.
Yeah, I think if it's the infancy of a program, it's really important to get a sense of where you are. So maybe a gap assessment, a suite of compliance assessment is critical. If you've already made some inroads, then looking for adjacent opportunities, some automation. But if you're a mature program, then I think you need to be thinking about unleashing AI, automation, differential privacy. That should be your bandwagon for the next 2 or 3 years.
Awesome. I'll add my chain of thoughts here. So I would basically say, regardless of the novelty, the status of your program in terms of maturity, you should always be working on an abstraction. If you think of GDPR, LGBT, CPR, NDMA, etc., all of these laws have some level of commonality and some level of differentiation. There are portions of the law that are extremely theoretical and cannot be implemented. So it's critical for you to work with engineers, attorneys, compliance specialists to say, what does compliance and trust mean for us? What are the minimal set of controls, verification methodologies, trainings, etc., that we need? And that subset of information is something you will own for your company. And that is something I think you should update on an ongoing basis as new laws come up, as new incidents happen. Because, in this case, working as a privacy engineer is like being a law and order script writer. In that TV show, Law and Order with Sam Waterston, you always say incidents are pulled from the headlines, but it's coincidental, right? What they do is they always are looking at what's happening in the real world and they create episodes from it. What you should do as a privacy expert, regardless of how long your program is to come up with those examples and then get to a point where you can basically tell your board of directors and your compliance assessors that our program is mature enough that we have our own abstraction, which keeps us in compliance and trust even before the law starts. If you can essentially build that culture where rather than the law influencing you, you influence the law, that's a great place to be. And there is no secret sauce to it. You have to start early, build on an ongoing basis, and demonstrate the outcomes, both in terms of numbers and culture as well. So with that being said, our panel is over. Unless anybody has any last thoughts, I'm happy to give people some time before the next session starts. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Huang. Thank you, Jim. Thank you for all the folks backstage. Appreciate it. Thank you for a great panel. And let's keep the conversation going. Fernando?
Thank you so much, everybody. It was really great to have you. Thank you for sharing your insights.